So welcome to Modular Housing. The first comment I'd like to make is that the topic for this panel session is modular housing. It is not modular construction. Modular housing and its relationship with BTR cuts across a number of issues. And having been speaking with my panel over the last couple of weeks in relation to this session, it has struck me how relevant modular housing and the issues around that cut across all of the aspects of BTR in relation to development, planning, finance, investment, as well as placemaking and housing per se. So I'm sure we will all learn a lot from this, including myself. I'm a corporate and funds partner at Winkworth Sherwood, which is a law firm, and my interest is on the investment side. And my fellow panel members today are going from my right to left is Rosie Toogood. She is CEO of L&G Modular Homes and has a long history in relation to issues and supply chains in relation to mass delivery of engineered goods. And she's got some very interesting to say about this area. Graham Sibley is from the NHBC. Very important to those in the investment side and the construction side. Mark Farmer is the CEO of Cast Consultancy. And last but not least, Tom Shaw, who is at Ramboll. Now, to kick things off today, we're going to have a relatively short presentation from Mark, which will frame some of the issues, what we are going to be talking today. And then following that presentation, we will then be having a panel discussion about some of the issues. And without further ado, if you could possibly start your presentation. Sure. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks, James. Good afternoon, everyone. So, as the title suggests, I'm going to talk about the intersection of modular, or what I term construction as manufacturing, and there's a subtle difference which I'll come on to. And bearing in mind we're at a build-to-rent conference, it's the intersection with the build-to-rent market I'm going to focus on and try and understand what I think is actually an opportunity to do things differently. And why do I think we need to do things differently? This is really a summary of why I don't think we have a choice anymore. And any of you who's heard me speak before will probably be sick of me framing these terms of reference in terms of what the future of our industry potentially represents. And I wouldn't underplay the importance of these factors here you see in front of you. So we do know we have a skills crisis, but this is not something that's going to go away. It's only going to get worse. It is not cyclical, it's structural. It's going to create a level of pressure on our construction industry that we have not seen before. And actually, we've all probably thought it's been really difficult for the last few years building things, particularly residential construction, which is particularly difficult to do. But my prognosis is it will get even worse. And don't get lulled into any false sense of security that might come through a bit of a downturn, particularly in London. I think we're going to see some coming off of the market in terms of residential construction across all tenures, but that will mask what is a structural decline in our workforce, that even if we feel it might be going away slightly in the immediate period ahead, it actually is going to make it even more painful in the medium term, certainly in the long term. And if you're a build-to-rent developer or investor actively engaging in the construction market, you should see this as your problem. It's not the construction industry's problem in isolation, it is actually the real estate industry's problem. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are things that you may recognise, maybe you don't. But we certainly see this in the world that we're working in at the moment as being the real backdrop to all of this. So that's why I constantly talk about a burning platform. And that might sound melodramatic, but I do truly believe we have a set of circumstances at the moment that we haven't seen come together in the way that they have before. And I think what you're really seeing is a politicised agenda as well around the quality debate. So it's not just about the issue of construction capacity being a problem around the process, it's the end product that's going to be implicated as well. And what you're seeing is the government starting to get interested in this agenda. So you're hearing talk of a new homes ombudsman, you're talking about lots of interaction to a market where the consumer rights are increasingly being put to the fore, and that's being stoked up by poor quality home building. So we're seeing lots of media reports, not just in the trade press, but in national media, on television, about poor quality homes. That is completely linked to the skills agenda and all of the capacity issues and the problems I put up on the first slide. So this is a linked debate. And what you're also going to see is an output that comes from the Grenfell fire tragedy, which is leading to various things. Obviously, a public inquiry will play out in due course with Sir Martin Moore-Bick leading, but you also have the building regulation review that's going through at the moment with Dame Judith Hackett. And what you see underneath that overlay there is a process map that she prepared for the first phase of her review findings before Christmas, which is the building regulation system as it currently works in the UK. And it's no surprise perhaps that we really struggle to understand how we put buildings together. But mostly for me, the implication of this is the fact that we're going to see a market that's going to have a higher level, a higher bar for how it puts its process together, how it deploys skills, and how it checks the competency of the people that are working on construction sites. And there's going to be a high level of compliance and enforcement that is undoubtedly going to come out of the findings of the Building Regulation Review and other things. That raises the bar even higher for skills in the labour force, just at a time when we're entering a structural decline, and it will put more pressure on building things the same old way. So that's where modular construction, constructions manufacturing, whatever you want to term it, becomes a key point of difference around enabling us to reduce labour, to work productively, to control quality and processes. And apologies, some of these slides aren't animating. What you would see there, if that had been built bit by bit, is effectively 4 reasons for failure in our industry. One is the fact that we are too focused on bespoke design. Every single job we do, architects and other designers, and it's not anyone's fault, it's just the way we've been conditioned as an industry, bespoke design from a set of first principles without layering in a level of commonality. We're too site labour intensive, so basically everything we do is reliant on work at the work face, the final work face, rather than looking at a value add process that could be done in a more controlled fashion. And we're too fragmented. We're fragmented vertically down the supply chain, and you only have to look at what's happened with Carillion recently to understand that's a fragile model where subcontracting and tier one contractors sitting over the top based on a cash flow model is precarious. And you'll see that playing out more and more during the course of this year as being an issue around potential points of failure. I do not believe Carillion will be the last high-profile casualty, but time will tell. And also we're horizontally fragmented, so there's lots of trade silo working. We have designers off to one side from construction people, and actually we need to get more integrated. And that's, for me, why I think there is an opportunity to bring the build-to-rent sector, which is an emerging sector, and lots of what we've heard about already today suggests there's great opportunity still to shape this sector and to think about the consumer. As I think Richard Jackson said earlier, the build-to-rent maybe is a misnomer because it should be about the consumer. It implies it's a construction-led process. And for this discussion, yes, that is important, but it should be about the consumer. And ultimately, if we're going to bring some of the principles of these 2 documents, which I just happen to be personally both involved with, in terms of best practice, how you deliver build-to-rent, but then overlay that with the problems of our construction industry, big opportunity in my mind to think differently. So just thinking about manufacturer-led construction, so what you've got is a scenario where this is maybe different to just the perception, it's just about modular homes. And Rosie's going to talk a bit, no doubt, about the LNG model in terms of what she's doing and what she'll be bringing to market later this year. But there's a wider definition for me about thinking of construction as a manufacturing process, which does encompass modular, volumetric delivery. It also thinks about component level delivery and design for manufacture and assembly. So a different thought process that redefines how we design, not bespoke design, but a platform of components that you can put together in a different way that enables you to build like Lego. Still having mass customization, high design flair embedded into that, particularly around envelopes and urban realm and placemaking, etc. But the chassis of buildings should be a lot more regularised. Why do we build 200 unit schemes with 50 different bathroom types or 80 different kitchen types. It doesn't make any sense. And that's where I think there's a great opportunity to change that and think about flowchart processes, manufacturer-led processes in construction that we don't ordinarily do. And what needs to come with that is a different form of procurement. So ultimately, we need to not just think about how we design and manufacture, but how do we organise. So again, the Carillion scenario that's played out over the last few weeks just shows you that traditional lump sum ownership by tier one contractors is not a way forward that I think is actually sustainable. We need to get more integrated. We need to have different transfer of risk because people are holding risk at the moment that aren't able to hold that risk anymore. So we need to think about project teams that are much more aligned. Build to rent offers a great opportunity, particularly if it's linked to portfolio development and investment portfolio and programs of work, not just one-off projects, to organise in collective teams that repeat and go from job to job, take learning, actually embed design principles alongside construction experts and manufacturers at day one. And you won't see this in the speculative development world much. I don't think that the drivers are there, but in build to rent, I think there's a very different set of drivers that will enable that. And here's some, I'm not going to go through all of these, but these are the reasons why I think that intersection between build to rent and construction as manufacturing, I think is so important. A set of circumstances you don't see in other parts of the residential market. And these are drivers I think we should be building off in terms of driving a different behaviour. So closing, I think the build-to-rent market we're trying to establish here in the UK, and let's face it, it's still an immature market, massive growth in the last few years, but actually big upside still to go for. But don't think that the growth of that market won't be impacted by the construction industry's problems, because it will. And actually, if we're going to overcome that, it needs a different approach. And that, for the reasons I've just said around those characteristics of build-to-rent, there's a great opportunity for people to think differently, but it needs leadership. It needs leadership from developers who are engaging in this market, investors that are sitting behind them who are funding it, the consultant advisors that are part of those delivery teams, and the supply chain that's also going to form part of that solution. And that is not someone else's problem, it's our collective problem to work out how we do that. And if we do embrace that opportunity, I think there's a massive quick win for the industry, not just for build to rent, but for the construction industry as well to reform itself. So thank you. Hopefully that sets the scene for discussion, James.
Thank you very much, Mark. Exactly what you say. BTR in the UK, at any rate, is still a nascent industry, and we are, if you like, now 5 years into it, moving into the construction phase. As we know from the investment point of view, the supposed walls of money are there, and we are now in the cycle that those sites are now being developed out and built. There's been a lot of discussion, and there's a lot of press around those that, both from the investment point of view and from the owner-operator developer point of view, of those who are establishing modular construction businesses. But certainly from my point of view, we still see from the investment point of view some myths that surround modular construction. And some of those myths, I think, need to be debunked roundly. And as Mark mentioned, I think that takes leadership in the industry to sit there and do that through all of the participants in this industry. And I thought it might be interesting, Graham, there's a clue in the title that you have of Market Development Manager. So what do you see are some of those myths or perceptions around modular construction and modular housing?
Yeah, thanks, James. Yeah, I almost feel like you're asking me to be the harbinger of doom here.
Correct.
But hey, sometimes NHBC gets portrayed in that way. Mm-hmm. I'm here to debunk some of those bits, as you say. If you think back to when NHBC was started in 1936, it grew out of a real concern of the quality of very, very fast output of new homes between the wars, gerrymandering, etc., etc. And since that day, we've been working on standards to improve those. But with regards to off-site manufacturing, MMC, I think one of the big myths is prefab. And a public perception of prefabrication, which goes back to what happened in the 1950s and a number of other perceptions of that. And that's not helped by media reporting. I remember seeing not so long ago a media report where an interviewer went up to tenants and asked, what's it like living in a prefab flat? And I think that's one of the perception pieces that we have to get over, because that's linked to a perception of lower quality, and the perception that if it's pre-manufactured or modular, it will be a lower quality home. Again, that's definitely not what we're about. A third element is that it can be seen as being risky. People have got memories of some of the failures we've had from modular or off-site in the past. The timber frame disasters in the 1980s, Ronan Point, John Prescott's homes, and his affordability to £60,000 homes. That's an interesting one where 5 phases were perfectly good. The 6th phase, there was a design change, which this is where we must learn. That change wasn't fully communicated through the whole process, and it had a knock-on effect on the final delivery of that home and led to long-term problems. Heard a perception from architects. I was at an event yesterday where architects raised the concern of, well, isn't modular going to lead to Soviet-state housing type approach? Are we going to get monolithic construction, everything looking the same? And I think that's, again, a myth which is not true. The repeatability is a good point, the certainty you get from off-site manufacturing, but there is a lot of scope for flexibility in the way the homes, the buildings are finally designed and fitted out as well. Hear a lot from mortgage providers, investors, insurers, that a modular home will be difficult to mortgage, expensive to insure, could be a poor investment risk, and ultimately could lead to lower valuations. I think that's where NHBC is trying to work very hard with manufacturers, with architects, with designers, and the lender and investment community, because we would view an NHBC warranty and insurance the same, exactly the same, on a home that's built using modular as it is on a traditionally built home. We can do that because we work through the whole rigor of the components and the quality assurance on those, and how the whole home is designed, the building is designed, the integrations, the constructions, and we sign off on the whole building. And that's important that we need to keep getting that over to investors and to lenders, that they can have confidence investing in homes built using off-site. And my final point is that there's a perception or a myth that modular will save the housing crisis. It can go some way towards it, but of itself, it won't do so. There are a number of elements which I think have been touched upon this morning with land, investment planning, market models, need for continued government support, and they'll need to come on through as well.
I think that's a very good point, and it's very useful about what you're doing in the industry to gain that acceptance in relation to investors, developers, and the residents themselves. In relation to the perception and the synergies between BTR and modular housing, you end up sort of making the statement that modular housing is, or modular construction off-site, is somehow cheaper than any other form. And when we use the word cheaper, particularly in the Western countries, we assume that that is lower quality. And Tom, how do we overcome this sort of association with modular housing and inferior quality, if you like?
Okay, well, I guess for those of you not familiar with Ramble, we are a multidiscipline engineering consultancy. We've got worldwide coverage, about 1,200 people in the UK covering all built aspects of the built environment. But for us, we've been working in modular and off-site construction for about 15 years or so in the UK. And going to Scandinavia, we've actually been working in off-site construction for 50 years, building off-site homes. It's very much the norm over there. But one of the big challenges and repeating challenges we have had in recent years is debunking these myths. We've had multiple hoops to jump through in dealing with insurance and perception of these homes.
And that's outside of the UK as well, as well?
Outside the UK, but I mean, it's primarily in the UK that we've had these issues in recent years, these challenges. But I think we have to remember the technology's moved on, our understanding of materials has moved on, you know, building regulations have moved on, of course, in light recent events, there'll be further updates, I'm sure, but we're a long way away from those, the the poor quality prefab homes of the 50s and 60s. In fact, we could almost say prefabrication has become a dirty word. We're not allowed to use it anymore. So we've come up with all these other terms, whether it's MMC, off-site construction, off-site manufacturing, whatever it might be. But so we can't use the word prefab anymore. But I think one of the best ways we can actually dispel these myths are actually showing people the actual product. We had a fantastic scheme last year. It's not modular, it's a CLT building. For those not familiar with CLT, cross-laminated timber, it's essentially a big flat pack, solid timber engineered form of construction. But we had a great scheme, Dalston Works, a build-to-rent scheme complete last year. We took as many people as we could to that scheme during construction. A lot of questions we get asked by clients as well. Will the residents like to live in a timber frame building? I don't think they actually care, to be honest. They don't know the difference whether they're in a concrete building or if it's made out of timber or whatever it might be. And
it is when you use a hammer drill into the wall, as we all know.
It might be easier. There you go. So you can hang up your pictures that much easier. But, so I think a lot of it is getting over the perception. I think a lot of it has come from the financial side of things as well. It's just making sure that, and things like BOPAS and having NHBC on board makes a big difference. And I think the last couple of years we really have noticed there's a bit of a critical mass getting behind it with this increased political and media attention with off-site, following the likes of Mark's report.
And how do you get people to sit there and become aware of the construction process and on-site visits, as you say? Because I certainly know, in relation to my clients, there is just the immediate assumption that there's something inferior about it. And that's very much from a banking investment sort of point of view. And as we all agree with BOPAS and what NHBC are doing, it's just completely wrong.
I think so. I mean, you have to think, well, what's going to be better quality? Something that's built in a factory controlled environment, or something that's built outside on a cold, wet and windy site in various conditions with, so there's far superior quality in something that's built in that controlled environment and is easily assembled on site or delivered to site.
And on that point, Rosie, obviously, did L&G only invest in this product as a consequence of acceptance from NHBC and the lenders, or do you think it's more of a chicken and the egg? You're leading the market or very much participating in the market. And how did you find overcoming some of these issues?
Yeah, I think, if we step back, what we're facing in the housing industry is similar to just a typical product development process where, early on, there are a lot of questions, a number of, it follows a normal kind of adoption curve where you've got sort of like-minded people who take the time to understand the product, like the technology, understand it, and are prepared to adopt it early. They get engaged and you start to prove out the concept and then, the rest of the market starts to follow. And I think, we're in a very similar phase with modular construction right now. It's really important that we work together across the industry with, like-minded people who are prepared to make a change. At Legal & General, we've invested heavily to, not to just construct in a shed in a way in which you would construct on a field. We are manufacturing houses, and that is fundamentally different to construction.
Can you explain that?
Yeah, I mean, so we're starting right at the design process with robust design, design for manufacture, designing standard features so that as you go through the product development process and develop numerous products, you can read those features across from one product to the next. So very simple principles of robust design and design standardization.
So is that what Mark was referring to about repeatability?
Exactly, yeah. And then if you take those robust designs with the standard features into manufacturing, using lean manufacturing principles, simplifying the methods of manufacturing and how the parts come together, really getting into the detail of the best way to construct things, and doing so through a pre-production phase. So we have spent the last 6 months doing prototypes in our factory just to gather data, to fail, to understand why we failed, to gather that data, to learn, to put in root cause and analysis to learn from that and fix the problems. And by doing that, we're just following a standard product introduction process that any manufacturing and engineering company would follow. And we believe by doing that, we'll end up with better products coming to market, and we'll go through this continuous learning. And really, many industries have proved out that, by adopting robust product design and lean manufacturing techniques and engaging your supply chain, you can continue to develop your products, develop their robustness, increase quality, shorten lead times, drive down cost, and pass more functionality to the customer. And that's what we're doing.
And I think there is, again, a misconception that people who, particularly in BTR, who are moving into modular construction off-site methods have almost come out of nowhere and set up overnight. I think most of us on this panel are aware that the design and the building of those businesses has been going on for many years, and there's already a lot of capital sunk in relation to exactly the processes and the supply chain and getting it right that you've referred to. And this isn't something itself as an industry that's been come out of a box and happened. I mean, there's a lot of experience in this around the world, and there's a lot of effort being put in to get this product right for this market.
Correct. I mean, what we're doing in the UK at this point in time is actually quite groundbreaking. New products, they're designed in a different way to traditional construction. They're designed with modular in mind to a level of detail that actually a typical set of architects and structural engineers and M&E consultants wouldn't have to go down to on site, because the man in the van has everything he needs and he just fills in the gaps, So, you've got to get to a different level of detail on the design. In terms of the factory, new factory, new methods of construction, new processes, new layouts. And the team that we're putting together, there isn't a sort of, recruitment consultant that you can ring up and just say, send me your modular manufacturing people.
I think some people think that's the way it works.
So we're, and it is one of the really exciting and satisfying parts of this journey, actually, which is, bringing people from what I'd say are complementary industries together to build teams that can do this. So, in our factory, we've got people with construction experience, people from design consultancies, people from automotive and aerospace and electronics, and the skill is in bringing those teams together, putting them in what are unfamiliar and slightly different environments, and helping them work together to create a new and groundbreaking product, and kind of keep the faith on, the belief that actually if you get down to the level of detail, you drive standardization to a new level, then over time you will deliver a product which is absolutely groundbreaking and transforms this marketplace.
Which I think is already happening to some degree. How, and possibly maybe this is one for you, Mark, how do you address the concerns that I've raised or heard raised by some architects that this is just not an architectural product? It is, at the risk of saying it, it is a flat-packed solution from a very large factory. And not all architects say that, I might add, but I have heard some criticism of this.
And you will continue to get that criticism. It's going to be about mindset. It's going to be about willingness to engage with a new agenda. As I said in my opening comments, I don't think this is something that designers should be wary of in terms of dumbing down creativity. I think what they should be doing is actually focusing creativity on the areas where architects and engineers can add more value, and actually standardising on a common platform the balance of what is, in many respects, quite mundane work in terms of running through elements of detailed design. Actually, there's been a de-skilling even in design professions of some of that more technical engineering-led architecture that has to be bespoke, repeated on every job. If you can automate that and link that to a design for manufacture and assembly type process, then the real value add becomes in doing the interesting things, maybe the mass customised bits that I referred to around making sure that you don't have cookie cutter design. Because for me, lots of people are still associating prefab, whatever you want to call it, with quite blocky, uniform typologies that you can immediately see, well, that's a modular building. And if that's the case, for me, we failed.
Can you, though?
At the moment, I think you can. I think you can see a modular building, and there are modular buildings out there that you quite clearly see because of the rhythm of the building and the typology that they could have been constructed in a different way. I'm not saying that there's not traditional buildings that look a bit mundane either, because there are. But actually, I think the focus, the modular industry, or whatever you want to call it, has to work harder. I think it has to dispel those myths around the fact it can create high-quality architectural products through a manufacturing process. And I think, just to pick up on some of the previous points that have been made, part of the issue we have at the moment is the existing off-site manufacturing sector in the UK is not where the future lies. And we're in this sort of slight disconnected phase of transition in the UK where I think digitally led manufacturing is the future, not building in construction in sheds. And there's a lot of that at the moment. There's a lot of it that's been born out of other sectors such as education, health programs, MOD, and lots of that, unfortunately for those businesses, will not be transferable into residential. And I certainly would not use some of the systems out there for residential, either for sale, for institutional rental, for affordable housing even. So it's really important we don't get ahead of ourselves here found thinking we have a big scalable off-site market at the moment. We don't. And actually it needs small businesses along the lines of what Rosie's doing at LNG, but actually not just the big businesses, but smaller businesses as well with the same methodologies that are using digital fabrication techniques that then can take the design profession on that journey with them around DFMA application. And then you start moving into a world where you can get higher quality products by default. And we move to a world where, like in Germany or Japan or in Scandinavia, where actually off-site manufactured product is seen as by default as being higher quality than normal build in a field.
Well, that's a gift for you, Mark. I think we like to say in BTR, it's been on a journey itself that somehow BTR was seen as an inferior product to any other renting product. I think the experience has been, and the market perception is changing, that institutional invested BTR is obviously, for all the various reasons, is a better quality product than, say, the other housing options, renting housing options that have been in the market. And then, as Mark just said, how far are we along that journey to sit there and change that view that off-site construction is better?
Yeah, I think there are so many benefits potentially to build to rent in terms of on-site speed, but it also produces some challenges. And we're all having to learn as we go on. Mark and I were talking about this earlier, how the skills you need on site are actually going to change. So we've got the certainty of the quality of shall I say, the modules coming from the factory, but how are they going to be integrated and fitted together? And those are some challenges which we're all learning as we go along. Certainly we're working with LNG and with other manufacturers to really look at those designs and how they integrate on site. And that needs to be established right from the very earliest stage of design. So there's engagement with architects as well, with contractors. What we need to see is early engagement, review of the whole process, before tender process, before it goes out to a contract, for example, because the last thing we want to see is changes having to be made on site that weren't originally planned. That's going to really mess up the contractor as well, and ultimately could delay the delivery of the project for the investor.
Well, that's something obviously local authorities are very interested in, because particularly around BTR, when at the planning point of view you're discussing viability, if you're building in a modular construction cost into that, then that needs to be delivered on.
Yes.
Now traditionally, as we all know, then the architect, fine, you get your planning consent, then the architectural design changes, the engineers have changed, the constructors change, and we end up where we end up with a bit of a design by committee and construction by committee. Is there a role of the engineers and yourselves in getting involved in getting councils to sit there and demand those qualities that you say that the industry can deliver?
I think some of the work that Mark's doing with the Minister's working group on standardisation of acceptability is going to go a long way towards that, setting a bar for not only the quality of modules or components that come out of the factory, but also how they're finally manufactured or put together on site. And that will set some, Mark can talk about far more than me about this, about how that will be delivered on site and the assurance and the insurance of quality.
I think we'll get to that in a minute about what the industry is doing in relation to getting to that bar, as you say. Going back to the point that there is this assumption that we've got a skills shortage in relation to bespoke construction. Nothing's changed since 1895, etc., etc. Are we going to have a skills shortage in relation to the design issues and the modular way of doing things from the design up? I think that's first for Tom, but I'd be interested in your view too.
I think culturally, I'm glad Mark just mentioned digitalisation as well. We're seeing a real shift in the way we design and our design culture. We're finding our graduates who come out of university now coming out with a whole new set of skills in coding. They can write their own design tools, and I think we're now being able to do more for less in terms of design. And I think we're seeing there is a decreasing market, but we're having to adapt to as I say, do things for less and make decisions, more informed decisions earlier on in the process. In the last, I'd say probably last year or two, we've seen some real progress in our business where we've had these fresh young grads coming out of university, and we give them a task to do, and it's something we would have spent months doing. They go, oh, why would you do it this way? And they go away and they write a piece of software that does it in a few minutes. And I think we're really at this sort of infancy and the start of this curve of digitalisation and digital design tools. I'm not just talking BIM, I'm talking all sorts of things, whether it's looking at massing of buildings, whether it's optimising the panels on a building to minimise waste. There's a whole suite of tools that can be developed there. I think that's where young people might get particularly more excited with this sort of new generation coming through of coders and a shift in culture.
And is that being led by the universities and the colleges at the moment, or
I guess.
Or is the market demanding it already?
I think the youngsters, well, I don't call them the youngsters, but the guys coming out of university it's in their interests. I guess maybe it's the mentality of an engineer, perhaps, but they're coming out really eager. We set up these networks. We call it guerrilla network in our business, where everyone wants to get involved, and anyone who wants to be part of it can do it. So they get together, they can write these these bits of software together. So I don't whether they're teaching. I'm sure it's part of the curriculum now at university. I'm not sure, but it will be. We're seeing it in schools, especially now as well.
I can see Rosie getting excited out of the corner of my eye. So that becomes a supply chain issue, something that you've dealt with a lot. I mean, is this built into the LNG?
Absolutely. I mean, again, we're very much at the start of the journey, but collaborative design is really fundamental to changing the industry. I think we'll be using the types of tools Tom's talked about, BIM in particular, and expecting our suppliers to work, doing design in context using BIM with federated models. So that we don't get to the end of the process and find we have clashes. Actually, we're dealing collaboratively with design issues. We're doing design reviews live, and we are making the changes and understanding the impact of those changes, and then testing and analysing them in a collaborative way. And I think that is again the way many industries work now, and a huge opportunity for construction manufacturing that will help us move further faster.
And just going on to that supply chain issue, and Mark was saying about Carillion and the very low profit volume model that those tier one constructors have worked on for so many years, and harbinger of doom that maybe others that do that. I mean, what is the supply chain in relation to modular construction as the model is developing in the UK?
Well, as it currently stands, it's the same supply chain as the traditional construction industry. But I don't have any data to support this, but my intuitive view from what I've seen so far is there's got to be so much waste in that system, just because of the issues that Mark highlighted earlier about, everything's bespoke. Every time you do something, you start again. And the benefits you get in terms of, cost, lead time and quality from standardization, repeatability, volume, manufacture are all great opportunities for this industry. And we intend to sort of set about, just tackling those problems and bringing those benefits to market.
So it sounds like both, the modular industry is relying on traditions that have been around for a long time and sort of nothing to see here in that way. But on the other point of view, it is a brave new world, and we're only 4, 5, 6 years into that brave new world model, which is so completely different from the previous prefab model favoured by local authority frameworks.
Yeah, I think the industry's very much at the start of an evolution. How fast it goes will depend on, the attitudes of clients and how fast people are willing to move and adopt the new technology, and how successful, we are collectively as an industry. There are a number of people now playing in this space. I think there's momentum building. I actually think industries grow faster actually when you've got ecosystems of numbers of different companies trying to do the same sort of thing, so you can address the issue of the supply chains in their broadest sense, so you can start to influence the work that the designers are doing, start to influence the work that the accreditation bodies are doing, start to influence the work that the supply chains are doing, and change more rapidly when you have a number of manufacturers working in this way. Seen that in many other industries, and I expect that to happen in construction.
So possibly for all of you, what's the industry doing about working together on this sort of collaborative approach to provide skilled jobs for people, as well as quality homes, which aren't boring at the end of the day, and which residents want to live in? How is the industry all coming together to achieve that rather high bar, as you put it?
Well, I can start from where we see it as NHBC, and that's been certainly a change in our outlook on how the industry is working, because it's changing, and so NHBC has to be working with that change and helping that assist that. So collaboration is a very important element of it, and a holistic view as well, on everything from design through to final completion, and how it's working on the site-specific environment. Is a material going to perform on the edge of the Mersey with the wind blowing in from the Irish Channel, Irish Sea, for example? So those are things which we're constantly doing. The work that we're doing with L&G and others is about collaboration and testing and getting to the point where we're all happy that we're going to deliver a home of sufficient quality that will give that confidence. I think the last thing we want to see is any failure, which would set the MMC back a number of years, and we all have to have that. I think there'll be some changes coming through from the outcomes of the Hackett review. I think that will lead to a greater strong requirement for a golden thread, if you like, of where have the materials come from, what actually has gone into that building, and how has it been tested as well.
I think I'd like to say that as an industry, it kind of refers back to the session before this. We're probably not, we don't share knowledge enough. We're not that collaborative. I think everyone, we are an industry of a series of cottage industries, if you like. Everyone's got their own system that they're trying to protect. And I guess that's one of those concerns that we often come across with clients, is that why do we want to buy into a system where we're then held over a barrel, we can't go anywhere else? So we've got this whole industry of different companies producing their own system. Referring back to Denmark again, or Scandinavia, everything out there, I was talking, the large majority of large-scale residential jobs are performed in precast concrete, but it's a standardised system, unlike we have over here. So there's a number of suppliers working using the same approach. So there's a wide supply chain, there's competition there, and everyone learns that standardised code that we keep talking about. We should have these codes and design guides in the UK, which we don't have, but they're in existence in other countries. So I think there's some good lessons to be learned from overseas. I don't think it's perfect by any means, but there's certainly some lessons learned on standardisation that we can learn from overseas.
And accreditation, presumably.
Yes.
Mark?
Yeah, I think Tom's point now about lack of collaboration is an interesting one, because as we move from traditional construction into maybe a different way of doing things, I think one of the first casualties of that might actually be the existing off-site sector, going back to the reasons, the points I raised earlier around the fact that a lot of it's analog still, it's not digital, and I think digital is going to be the key enabler for where the future lies. It's not going to be building in sheds, it's going to have to be digitally assured, from design through to manufacture to assembly to construction integration with site-based content as well, into asset inventory, which is particularly important for build to rent, obviously, because it creates a digital management platform around how your building's performing and how you can maintain it. But what I see, this issue about lack of collaboration in the off-site supply chain at the moment, I think is a big problem in terms of scalability, because you've got all these unique systems out there competing on what is perceived IP of the uniqueness of their system, when in reality that's the weakness of their system. We need to move to much more of an open source type model that, don't get me wrong, actually people doing volumetric or 2D panelized systems can still exist in that world, but there's a backbone of commonality, of product platform type approach, if you like, that's used in automotive that can be used to better scale the industry. Because if all of these small cottage industry type players continue to compete based on the uniqueness of their system, firstly, it's an issue around debt financing, and I've seen very clearly the fact that banks get nervous about lending into off-site manufacturing projects, where actually there's a concern that if that manufacturer goes bust, how do you finish it? You need to have an ability to have cross-source components and interoperable design protocols and design guidelines. I think if we're going to open the market up at scale, if we want to be delivering 50, 60, 70,000 units a year, which I think should be the ambition of the manufacturing sector to deliver against the housing crisis, then that's the only way forward. It's not more the same.
Wow. So I assume you agree with that, Chris?
Well, you know, as part of the work Mark's doing with the Housing Minister to, you know, modernise the construction industry, we are working with Mark on that approach. And I think, as I said earlier, you know, industries grow when there are a number of people doing similar things. And, you know, you get that collaboration, you get stronger supply chains, you get stronger design partners, consultants, and that's how industries mature. You know, the other industries, the aerospace industry, the automotive industry, they can be active competitors, but there's a level of collaboration, particularly around things like standardization, digital design platforms, and systems. So I think that's just a natural evolution for the industry.
So it sounds like the journey we're on is maturing. And it sounds like we're almost there, but there's still some very interesting issues that need to be worked out on a collaborative approach relatively quickly, I would have thought. And that the direction of travel, as the panel agree, is in the right direction, and it's possibly going to move more quickly than it has been. Is that right, or?
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with that. I mean, we've for us, I think we're seeing the stars aligning for off-site and modularisation. I mean, you know, we've talked about this increased attention we're getting. We've been lucky to work with a few key clients who have been keen to push the off-site agenda for some time, and as a result, there's some great examples out there that we can showcase now and show the world. But interestingly, though, I think even some of our more conservative clients who historically wants to give off-site a bit of a wide berth are now coming back to us and are seriously considering it. You know, one of the things we look at is we carry this thing called a sprint review, where we can test how off-site ready a design is. So we're finding clients are coming to us with a scheme that's got multiple phases in it, and they might be going to planning. They know the first phase is going to be constructed in with a traditional approach, but they're thinking, well, over the next 5 or 10 years, off-site is coming this way, so that they want to make sure and future-proof their schemes to make sure it's viable.
Can I add to that? Yeah, I think there's another sign of growing maturity in some of the volume manufacturers, some volume house builders who are now starting to look and get rather more engaged in off-site. So the likes of Berkeley We know that all the other volume builders are at least looking more seriously at the use of off-site manufacturing as part of their product. I think that's quite a big change as well. So I think we'll work with them to continue to ensure that works through. But ultimately, collaboration, the overall standardisation will make life a whole lot easier from a warranty point of view, because we can transmit that, hopefully, confidence to the investor and lender community, because there's much more certainty in what's being delivered. Also, substitutability and interoperability, those are going to be issues which are going to be required in the future.
On that point, I might put it to the audience. I mean, do you, in the audience, whether you're representing developers, house builders, lenders, investors, have any particular concerns about modular construction, or are you experiencing any issues with modular construction as part of your business plans? Right, well, okay. I'm going to ask one of my colleagues who acts for the banks, what are the issues that we see? Ruby? Sorry, if you just might use the microphone.
Well, the banks are looking at it and sort of a bit distrusting, and they don't want to put any money into it until somebody else puts their money in first. And basically there aren't any warranties. They're looking for an equivalent of an HPC type scenario. They haven't got that yet, and they don't want to be the first to lose out. And it's all a new product, it's a bit newfangled. The Swan Housing is out there, and they're building stuff for local authorities and hopefully housing associations. But there's so few and far between, as you say, if one goes bust, what do? Where's your money gone?
All right, Graham, I think you'll probably robustly disagree with that issue.
Well, I think robustness is one of the key word there. And we know from experience of working with Swan and the systems that they're looking to utilise, there are potential that could potentially work through, and we're still looking at engineering solutions that will give us the confidence that those homes can have the same level of warranty and insurance that we would provide to a traditionally built home. There are just a couple of points which we're working with that. And we've identified that with other manufacturers as well, who have realised that to get to that level of standard, of quality, NHBC's got a role in working with them. And again, that's where NHBC's had to change its approach, in being more collaborative to ensure that those homes are built to the standard we expect. But we have a role in helping manufacturers get to that point, rather than just putting the hands up and saying, no, that doesn't meet our standards. So there's that evolution as well, the way that we work, and hopefully that will start to be seen. We're certainly working with all the major lenders to establish the confidence with them that if it's got an HBC warranty, it's the same as if it were for a traditionally built home. And that's going to be so important to build that confidence. And that's what we're doing in the market all the time.
Front left. Just down the front there, sorry. If you could just say who you are and where you're from.
I'm Katie, I work at PGN, so junior lending predominantly. We have an issue, we're looking at, it's slightly left field but still modular, we're looking at funding a scheme that's containerised student accommodation, so recycling shipping containers. We're just slightly worried. I mean, there's similar schemes being done in the industrial sector, there's a scheme down in Cornwall that actually is going very well. We're just worried about liquidity and what you underwrite, whether you have to underwrite a discount, how it's going to be viewed on exit when it's slightly ropier in 10 years' time, and how it's going to bear up given the sort of lack of comps.
I think that might be one for you, Mark.
Did you say it was for student accommodation or for residential?
For student.
Well, it's more
residents too, aren't they?
They're probably more expendable in the day in terms of what they will accept. But I think it's a fair point, and it's a relevant point, because I think you're going to see more and more overseas players entering the UK market using containerised principles, and it introduces a whole new concept around assurance and accreditation and warranties, whereas at the moment that whole market is operating mostly around the ability to inspect UK facilities both in terms of manufacturing facilities and also on-site completion works, that all of a sudden, if you're shipping containers coming from Dubai or Shanghai, then actually it's a different proposition. And so it's all going to be about the specifics of your individual scenario. It will have to be about assurance. It will have to be about evidencing of the technical standards, particularly if it's overseas sourced. Tom could probably say more about the structural integrity of shipping containers and how they're configured, but it's a really important point around what I see as continued future disruption of the UK market. You will see overseas players, and that in itself does bring risks. And I think it's really important to maintain a quality-led agenda in manufactured housing, that we're able to defray those risks by suitable assurance and accreditation schemes.
Okay. I think there was a question. Yes. There.
Hello, I'm Jeanette Veldkamp from Chapman Taylor Architect, and we do embrace modular. I had the pleasure to visit the factory in Leeds just over a year ago, and that just brought home what a massive undertaking this is. How do you deal with building in flexibility in the design, not only for the manufacturing, not only from a design point of view, but also for potential changes in legislations? What if the Part L requirements change, or changes in materials? How do you build that in when you're thinking about your manufacturing models?
Okay, so I would just see that part as part of robust design. That the fundamental issue is that when you embark on design, you understand what the requirements are, both the client's requirements and the requirements of the industry in terms of standards and regulations, etc. So that's job one. And the job of the chief engineer who's designing the product is to understand both how that exists now and how things might change in the future. And that's just a fundamental part of what I would see as robust design. I think you've got to think of these products as having a life cycle and evolving over their life. So we've been prototyping products and we've learned so much. Actually before we sell the first one into the marketplace, we'll have redesigned it, but that's just normal product design process. So I think it's a constant evolution. Nothing stands still, so stay awake.
Got time for two more questions, I think, in the back.
Rosie, David from Sigma. We do light-gauge steel framing. I've just read on your website, and it's almost like it was the best kept secret. Volumetric modular, my experience of that is four-corner steel posts, all the rest of it, you are CLT. Is that correct?
Our first products are CLT, yes.
Yeah, so can I ask what drove you down that? Apart from the obvious environmental benefits, it's probably the most expensive frames that pushing out there, so what drove you to go down that route? Because it is pretty innovative.
I think as we embarked on the original design process, that I think the sustainability credentials of CLT and the robustness of CLT were two of the main attractions of using that material. As we move forward, as I've just said, the focus will be on understanding what the client's requirements are, understanding how we meet regulatory requirements, and you'll see our products evolve as we move forward.
Thank you. Any last question? Just behind you there.
Hi, it's Sam Partington from Property Week. I was just wondering, does a panel think that we need a sort of a government standard or a kite mark or an accreditation for modular to give different parties involved in the process more confidence in the model?
Thank you, Property Week, for stealing my final question to the panel.
Should I go first?
Yep.
So I think the answer is yes, but the exact nature of what that looks like, I think needs to be carefully thought through. And there's been a couple of references to a working group that the Housing Ministers convened looking at that very issue, and it's linked to mortgage finance availability, building insurance, assurance of the process, and I'm chairing that at the moment, and Graham's colleagues at NHBC sit on that, as does Rosie, and as does about 30 other interested bodies. So it's actually got all of the stakeholders around the table to address this issue around arriving at a more collaborative approach that's underpinned by technical rigour, which in turn then enables risk underwriting in both the mortgage lending market, ultimately by default the institutional finance market as well, because most build-to-rent investors will want to see a mortgageable product if they broke that portfolio up for vacant possession value. So there's some work going on as we speak, which we'll run through in the next few months, that I'm hopeful, if we can get that collaboration amongst quite a few multiple players around the table representing manufacturers, developers, house builders, banks, building societies, insurers, warranty providers, if we can get something that creates a common platform as a minimum standard and the government then sit behind it, it could become that kite mark, as you call it, that creates a more an increased level of confidence in the sector.
Does everybody agree with that?
Absolutely.
Very good. That's what we want to hear. Collaboration already, as we live and breathe. Thank you very much, panel. I'm sure you'll join me in thanking them for that very interesting session. I've learned something.